In the peaceful village of Kasumba, a young bride named Amina stepped into her new home with a heart full of hope. She had left behind her parents and childhood comfort, carrying only dreams of love and belonging. She wanted nothing more than to be a good wife and a respectful daughter-in-law. Every morning she woke early to sweep the yard, fetch water and prepare food. She greeted her new family with a warm smile, believing that kindness would win their hearts. Amina was not only beautiful on the outside but also graceful in her nature. Her soft voice, gentle manners, and willingness to help everyone made people admire her. Neighbors would often say, "Musa is truly blessed with such a wife." These words made Amina blush with shyness, but deep inside she felt proud, thinking she had finally found her place. She imagined her marriage filled with laughter, children, and unity. But not everyone shared her joy. Her mother-in-law watched her closely, her eyes sharp with suspicion. Her sisters-in-law whispered among themselves whenever Amina passed by. The more the neighbors praised her, the heavier the silence grew inside the house. What Amina thought was love slowly turned into hidden resentment. She tried harder, offering respect, bringing small gifts, showing loyalty, but instead of warming their hearts, her goodness only fueled their jealousy. And though Amina still dreamed of happiness, a storm of envy was quietly rising around her, ready to shatter her hope. In Kasumba, the first days of Amina's marriage were filled with hope, but soon the shadows began to grow inside her new home. Her mother-in-law, Mama Zalia, and her two daughters, Maryam and Halima, could not stand the way people admired Amina. The neighbors often said, "She is respectful, she is hardworking, she is beautiful." Instead of being happy for her, they took those words like thorns pressing deeper into their hearts. Every smile that Amina received outside became a wound of jealousy inside the house. They began to whisper about her when she passed by. "Look at her, pretending to be perfect," Maryam would say under her breath. Halima would add, "She is not one of us, she is just a stranger here." Their whispers grew into gossip, and soon the entire family treated Amina as if she were an outsider. When she served food, they complained it was too salty. When she cleaned the house, they said she missed a corner. Even her silence was twisted into arrogance. Amina tried to ignore the cruelty. She believed that if she kept showing love and patience, their hearts would change. She woke earlier, worked harder, and spoke softer, but nothing was ever enough. The more effort she gave, the more they disliked her. Worst of all was Musa. At first, he was gentle and kind to her, but slowly, the poison of his family's words entered his ears. "She thinks she's better than us," his mother whispered to him at night. "She is bringing shame to our family with her fake sweetness," his sisters added. Musa, blinded by loyalty to them, began to see Amina differently. He stopped asking about her day, stopped noticing her efforts, and his once warm eyes turned cold. Amina felt the change deeply. When she reached for his hand, he pulled it away. When she smiled, he looked past her as though she were invisible. She longed to hear his voice say, "I am with you," but instead silence and distance grew between them. The nights became heavy for Amina. Alone in her room, she cried quietly, hiding her tears from the very people who wished to see her break. She whispered prayers in the darkness, asking for strength, asking for love, asking for a place to belong. But all she received in return were harsher looks and crueler whispers. The family that she wanted to call her own had turned into her cage. And the man she trusted most was slipping away from her. Amina did not yet know that jealousy, once planted, grows like a wildfire, and soon it would consume everything around her. The air was heavy that evening as Amina walked toward the lake with her clay pot balanced carefully on her head. The sun had already dipped behind the hills, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep orange and purple. The path was quiet, only the sound of crickets and her soft footsteps breaking the silence. She did not know that behind the bushes, shadows were waiting, her own in-laws, hearts filled with cruelty. As she knelt near the water to fill her pot, she suddenly heard laughter. It was not the laughter of joy but sharp, mocking laughter that cut through the night. Mama Zalia, her mother-in-law, stepped forward with a cruel smile. Maryam and Halima followed, their eyes burning with hatred. Amina froze, clutching her pot, her heart beating wildly. You thought you could fool us with your sweetness, Mama Zalia hissed. But you bring nothing but misfortune. Ever since you entered this house, sickness has spread, wealth has disappeared, and happiness has died. Amina shook her head, her voice trembling. That is not true, Mama. I have only ever wished for peace. I would never harm this family. But her words fell on deaf ears. Mariam sneered. Don't pretend. Everyone knows you are a witch. You hide your evil behind your pretty face. Halima added, you will not destroy us anymore. Tonight it ends. Before Amina could step back, rough hands grabbed her arms. She struggled, her cries echoing across the still water. Please. I am innocent. Musa. She screamed her husband's name, but the night swallowed her voice. The sisters-in-law pushed her closer to the edge. The clay pot fell, shattering on the rocks, its pieces scattering like her shattered hopes. The women's laughter grew louder as fear filled Amina's eyes. She begged, don't do this, I am your sister now, I have done nothing but love you. But their jealousy was stronger than her pleas. With one cruel shove, they pushed her into the lake. The water was icy cold, wrapping around her body like 1,000 knives. She gasped for air, thrashing desperately, but the weight of her soaked clothes dragged her down. She reached out, her fingers breaking the surface for a brief moment, as if asking the world to save her. Then the ripples swallowed her whole. On the shore, her in-laws stood watching, their faces twisted with satisfaction. Mama Zalia whispered, now the curse is gone. They turned and walked away, leaving the dark lake silent once again. But beneath the surface, Amina's heart still fought. Each breath burned, each second felt like death itself. She thought of her parents, of the home she left behind, and of the love she never received. With her last strength, she prayed in her heart for God to see her innocence. And though the night was cruel, fate had not yet finished her story. Back in the compound, the night was strangely calm. The crickets sang, the moon rose high, and the clay lamps flickered softly. Yet in that quietness, something heavy lingered in the air. Mama Zalia and her daughters walked into the courtyard as though nothing had happened, their clothes still damp at the edges from the lake. They exchanged secret glances but said no word of what they had done. Musa sat by the doorway, waiting for Amina. He asked, where is she? Didn't she go to fetch water? His voice carried both worry and confusion. Mama Zalia sighed loudly and shook her head. That woman is gone, she said coldly. She has run away from this house. She was never loyal to you. Musa's face tightened. Run away. No, Amina would never do that. But his mother's words came sharp and fast. Don't fool yourself, my son. She was never truly part of us. From the first day she brought us bad luck. She smiled for the neighbors, but she did not love you as you think. Tonight she showed her true self, she left. Mariam and Halima added fuel to the lie. We saw it ourselves, Mariam said. She was restless, packing her things earlier. She must have planned this. Halima crossed her arms and muttered, better she is gone. She was a stranger in this family. Musa wanted to argue, but doubt began to cloud his mind. Their voices surrounded him, pressing into his heart. Slowly, he convinced himself that maybe they were right. Maybe Amina had left. The house carried on with false peace. Meals were served, chores were done, and laughter even returned in small amounts. But beneath their smiles, guilt gnawed at Mama Zalia and her daughters. At night, when the lamps went out, Mariam sometimes heard Amina's cry echoing in her ears. Halima dreamed of the lake, dark and endless, pulling her down. Mama Zalia's heart raced whenever Musa asked simple questions like, do you think she'll come back? Each lie they told added weight to their souls. Still, they hid their fear behind hard faces. Forget her, Mama Zalia would say. She was not meant for you. But the silence in the household was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a graveyard. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper Amina's name. The chair she once sat on stood empty. The clay pot she used for cooking remained untouched. Her gentle laughter that once filled the rooms was now a haunting absence. Musa tried to bury his pain, but his heart was restless. Sometimes, late at night, he stepped outside and looked toward the path leading to the lake, hoping to see her silhouette return. But all he found was darkness. And though the family pretended well, destiny had already begun preparing a storm that would break their false peace forever. The waters of the lake had almost swallowed Amina when fate placed help close by. That night, 2 fishermen were rowing their small wooden boat across the lake, heading home after a long day. The air was calm, but suddenly they heard desperate splashing, followed by a weak cry. One of them shouted, "Wait! Did you hear that?" They rowed faster, guiding the boat toward the sound. Through the moonlight they saw her, Amina, her hands barely above the water, her face pale, her body sinking again and again. Without wasting a moment, one fisherman dived into the cold water. He pulled her fragile body toward the boat while the other reached out to drag her in. Amina's chest heaved with shallow breaths, and her eyes fluttered as though she were drifting between life and death. "She's alive," one whispered, placing his ear near her mouth. "But she is weak. We must take her to the healer before it is too late." They rowed quickly to the nearest village, where an old healer named Baba Jengo lived. He was known for saving those whom others gave up on. When they laid Amina before him, soaked and trembling, he bent down with gentle hands. "This one has seen death's face," he murmured, "but her time has not yet come." For days, Amina drifted in and out of consciousness. The healer gave her herbal drinks, massaged her body with warm oils, and sat by her side through the long nights. Slowly, her strength began to return. Her first words were whispers of disbelief. "Why am I alive?" Tears rolled down her cheeks as memories of the lake and her in-laws' laughter came back like sharp knives. "You are alive because God still has a plan for you," Baba Jengo told her softly. "Your enemies thought they buried you, but you will rise again. Do not waste this second chance." Those words sank deep into Amina's soul. As she regained her health, her sorrow turned into quiet determination. She realized she could not go back to her husband's house, where betrayal and cruelty lived, but she also knew she could not remain broken forever. One evening, while resting under the healer's tree, Baba Jengo handed her a small wooden box. Inside were old documents, land deeds and treasures left behind by her late father. "These are yours," he said. "Your father wanted you to stand on your own, not depend on anyone." Amina clutched the box with trembling hands. For the first time since her marriage, she felt a spark of hope. She was no longer just the young bride who entered a hostile home with dreams of love. She was a survivor, chosen to rise above betrayal. Her body still carried scars from the lake, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Amina stood silently, her eyes looking toward Kasumba. She would not return as the weak woman they tried to destroy. She would return as a living proof that no cruelty can kill destiny. While the household in Kasumba pretended to move on, celebrating Amina's disappearance as if a curse had been lifted, her true story was taking a very different path. Far from their lies and cruelty, Amina was slowly piecing her life back together in the quiet safety of Baba Jengo's village. Each morning, she helped the healer with small tasks, collecting herbs, preparing medicine, feeding the goats. Her hands, once worn out from serving ungrateful in-laws, now found new purpose. Her heart, though scarred, began to beat with strength again. Baba Jengo watched her closely, and one evening he said, "Child, your destiny is bigger than suffering. Your father left behind more than memories." He handed her an old wooden chest wrapped in cloth. With trembling fingers, Amina opened it and found folded papers, land deeds, property titles, and a few pieces of gold carefully hidden away. Her late father had planned for her future, leaving behind treasures in her name. For a moment, Amina could not breathe. Tears filled her eyes. All her life she thought she had nothing. She believed she was powerless, trapped in a home where she was never loved. But here in her hands was proof that she was not helpless at all. She had wealth, land, and a chance to create the life her heart longed for. From that day, Amina began to change. She invested the gold to build a small business in the village, trading food and cloth. Soon, her name was whispered with respect, not pity. She dressed with dignity, walked with her head high, and carried herself with quiet confidence. No longer was she the timid bride who bowed her head at insults. She had become stronger, wiser, and untouchable. The villagers admired her resilience. Women came to her for advice, children followed her with laughter, and elders blessed her for her kindness. Even though she had wealth now, Amina never turned arrogant. She shared her resources generously, paying for medicine, helping widows, and feeding the hungry. Through her actions, she showed that true strength was not in revenge but in rising above cruelty. Yet, deep in her heart, Amina carried a silent fire. She did not forget the lake, the rough hands that pushed her, or the cruel laughter of her in-laws. Their faces haunted her at night, but instead of breaking her, the memories sharpened her determination. She whispered to herself, "One day they will see me again, and they will know that I did not die." In Kisumba, her in-laws boasted that Amina had vanished forever, spreading lies to cover their crime. But while they lived in false comfort, Amina was becoming a woman they could never control again. She was no longer a fragile bride. They had unknowingly created a queen. And soon, the village would witness her transformation with their own eyes. Months passed, and the village of Kisumba buzzed with excitement as the annual Festival of Unity drew near. This was the biggest celebration of the year, when families gathered, traders filled the markets, and music echoed across the hills. Bright fabrics decorated the streets, drums thundered, and children ran with painted faces. For many, it was a time of joy and togetherness, but for Amina, it was the moment she had been waiting for. She had rebuilt her life in silence, hidden away from the eyes of those who thought they had destroyed her. Now she was ready to return, not as the weak, weeping bride they had cast aside, but as a woman transformed. That morning, she dressed in attire unlike anything Kisumba had seen before. A flowing gown of deep blue, embroidered with golden threads, wrapped around her like royalty. A necklace of her father's gold gleamed on her chest, and her hair was adorned with beads that shone under the sun. When she looked into the mirror Baba Jengo held up, she saw not a victim, but a queen. The festival was at its height when Amina arrived. She stepped into the crowd with calm grace, each movement filled with dignity. Conversations hushed, and all eyes turned to her. At first, people only stared, their mouths falling open. Then came the gasps, whispers, and cries of disbelief. "Is that not Amina?" someone shouted. "But they said she ran away," another voice answered. "No, she was dead. We all heard it." Yet there she was, alive, radiant, and stronger than ever. Children stopped their games to look at her. Women placed hands on their mouths in shock. Even the elders, who rarely showed emotion, leaned forward in disbelief. The woman whom everyone thought lost to the darkness of the lake now walked among them with elegance and power. Amina did not flinch at the stares. She held her head high and let her presence speak louder than any words. Each step she took through the festival ground was heavy with meaning. She was no longer the timid bride who begged for love. She was a survivor, a living proof that truth cannot be buried. And then came the moment her in-laws saw her. Mama Zalia's cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the ground. Mariam clutched Halima's arm, her face pale as if she had seen a ghost. Musa, standing beside them, felt his knees weaken. His mouth opened but no words came. The villagers turned to them with questioning eyes. "Didn't you say she ran away?" someone whispered loudly. "How then does she return like this?" The festival, meant for unity, suddenly became a stage of revelation. Amina's return was not only a miracle but also a judgment. Her very presence had pulled away the curtain of lies her in-laws had woven. As the drums continued to beat in the background, all of Kisumba knew, the woman they had buried in whispers had risen in glory. And nothing in the village would ever be the same again. The festival ground turned silent when Amina appeared, her regal presence shining brighter than the sun above Kisumba. All eyes were fixed on her, but none more than those of her in-laws. Mama Zalia's face lost all color, her lips trembling as though she had seen a ghost. Mariam and Halima clutched each other's arms, their eyes wide with fear. And Musa, her husband, felt his legs weaken, his chest tightening as guilt and disbelief crashed over him like waves. 4 months they had lived in comfort, telling everyone that Amina had abandoned them. They had painted her as disloyal, a woman who had run away in the night. Musa repeated their words to the neighbors until even he began to believe them. But now, here she was, alive, radiant, stronger than ever, walking like a queen in the middle of the festival. The villagers were the first to break the silence. "Isn't that Amina?" someone whispered. Another voice rose, louder this time. "But didn't her family say she ran away?" A third added, "How then does she return in glory, dressed like this?" The murmurs spread quickly through the crowd, turning into a storm of questions. Heads turned, eyes darted, and soon all fingers pointed toward Mama Zalia and her daughters. Their lies, carefully built for months, began to crack. The villagers remembered how Mama Zalia had insisted that Amina was never faithful, how Mariam and Halima spread gossip that she had fled with shame. Now those words sounded like poison, and the crowd tasted bitterness in their mouths. Musa could not move. His heart pounded as memories of Amina's gentle smile returned. The way she once tried to hold his hand, the way he pushed her away under his mother's influence. Each memory cut deeper than a knife. Shame burned his face. He wanted to speak, to ask her forgiveness, but his voice died in his throat. Amina, however, did not rush to them. She did not shout or accuse. She simply stood tall, her eyes calm but piercing, her silence louder than 1,000 voices. That silence spoke the truth. They had tried to bury her, yet here she stood, alive and untouchable. The villagers began to whisper openly now, no longer hiding their suspicion. "What really happened that night?" one asked. "Why would a woman with such grace leave on her own?" another questioned. An elder muttered, "If she returns like this, then surely she carries a truth we must hear." Mama Zalia's hands shook as she tried to steady herself. She forced a weak smile and said, She must have wandered and found wealth elsewhere." But her voice cracked, and nobody believed her. Mariam and Halima lowered their eyes, unable to meet the stares of their neighbors. The shame was unbearable. Their faces, once proud and arrogant, now reflected fear and defeat. And though Amina had not yet spoken a single word, the entire village already knew. The story her in-laws had told was a lie. Their power over her had crumbled, and the truth was about to set her free. The festival had barely ended when the whispers of the villagers grew too loud to ignore. The chief of Kisamba, a wise elder named Chief Baraka, called for a gathering in the village square. Word spread quickly, and soon the place was filled, men, women, children, all waiting to hear the truth. At the center stood Amina, dressed with dignity, her presence commanding silence. Across from her, trembling and pale, stood Mama Zalia, Mariam, Halima, and Musa. Chief Baraka raised his hand and spoke firmly. "For months we were told that Amina abandoned her marriage. But today she stands here alive, stronger than ever. This village demands the truth." A hush fell as Amina stepped forward. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of her suffering. "I never abandoned my home," she began. "I never betrayed my husband or his family. On that night when I went to fetch water, I was surrounded by those I trusted most. They called me a witch, they accused me of misfortune, and before I could defend myself, they pushed me into the dark waters of the lake." Gasps filled the crowd. Women covered their mouths in shock, and men shook their heads in disbelief. Amina paused, her eyes steady on her in-laws. "They left me to die, but fate spared me." Just then, the fisherman stepped forward. "We heard her cries," one testified. "We pulled her from the water with our own hands." Then Baba Jengo, the old healer, came forward, leaning on his staff. "She was brought to me weak, broken, and nearly gone. I nursed her back to life. Her story is true." The crowd erupted in murmurs. All eyes turned to Mama Zalia and her daughters. Their faces burned with fear. Musa looked at the ground, his shame too heavy to bear. Chief Baraka's voice boomed across the square. "So it is proven. Not only did you lie to your son and this village, but you tried to destroy an innocent woman. You clothed yourselves in false honor while hiding blood on your hands." Mama Zalia fell to her knees, her lips shaking, but no excuse came. Mariam and Halima sobbed quietly, their pride shattered. Musa, unable to hide, finally whispered, "I let myself believe their lies. I turned cold to the woman who gave me nothing but love. I am guilty too." But the villagers no longer saw Amina as a victim. They looked at her with admiration. The same people who once believed the gossip now bowed their heads in respect. "She is stronger than all of them," an elder said aloud. Amina stood tall, her tears shining but her voice steady. "I do not seek revenge. I only seek truth. Let my story remind you all. Jealousy destroys, but truth always rises." And in that moment, the woman once mocked and abandoned became a symbol of justice. Kisamba would never forget her strength. The sun rose gently over Kisamba, painting the sky with gold and pink. For the first time in many months, Amina felt peace in her heart. She had faced betrayal, cruelty, and death itself, yet she had risen stronger than ever. The chief and the villagers asked if she wished to return to Musa's home, but Amina only smiled softly and shook her head. "A house built on lies and hate cannot be my home," she said with quiet dignity. Instead of bitterness, Amina chose a different path. With her inheritance and the treasures her late father had left behind, she began to rebuild not just her life, but her village. She hired workers to dig clean wells so that women and children would no longer walk long distances for water. She built schools where children, especially young girls, could learn and dream of brighter futures. She opened small shops and gave women the chance to earn their own living. The villagers admired her more each day. People who once believed the lies now spoke her name with pride. Mothers told their daughters, "Be strong like Amina." Men said, "She is proof that no storm can destroy a woman of courage." As for her in-laws, they lived in constant shame. Wherever they went, whispers followed. The glory they once craved turned into ashes in their mouths. Musa could not even lift his eyes when Amina's name was mentioned, for he knew he had lost the jewel of his life forever. And so, Amina's story spread far beyond Kisamba. She became a living symbol of survival, of dignity, of triumph over cruelty. She had been thrown into the lake to be forgotten, but she rose again, and the whole world remembered her.